and welcome to video 5 of how to modify internal assessments in classical studies. If you've watched all of these, you'll know that we've been busy modifying this achievement standard 91204 from taking the sample assessment context that's online, which is looking at architecture and the relationship between that and subsequent cultures. And we've now turned it into this really exciting task looking at law, justice and democracy and the relationship between the classical ideas and values around those and those in a modern context, looking at both the comparing and contrasting and the relationship. So you've written your task, you've modified it, you've gone all the way through with your modifications to the teacher guidelines, the student instructions and the schedule. There is a bit of a next step, and that next step involves us going to the NZQA website. So this is it. And the very first thing that you need to do before you use an assessment is you need to moderate it. So you need to go in, I can never find this one off the top of my head, so I always go internal, moderation, cover sheet, and it usually brings it straight up. So then we get the internal moderation cover sheet there. Most of you will have seen this before. It's used, some schools have their own version, some schools use this as it is. This is the August 2013 version, March 2013, sorry. So if you see up here, this is where all of this information comes. And it's really important that your assessments are critiqued before they're used. That's to make sure that your students have the fairest chance of meeting the standard. So the source of this is me, the teacher, so I would definitely do something like that, highlight in there, I'd fill all this stuff in, it's pretty basic things. And what I would need to do is to get someone who isn't me, and preferably someone who is a classics teacher, to critique my assessment. So I would use my NZACT connections or someone else in my school, and I would ask them to critique this task. They have to sign their name to it, put their school or organisation and date it. And it's really important that this is done well before the task is due to be issued to students. There are things that the critiquer needs to look at. Some of these are things that we've looked at as we've been modifying. One of the things that's really important is that the instructions and the language are clear and appropriate. And that's really important to think about. If I were a student sitting here, would I understand what was needed? They need to be consistent with the curriculum at the appropriate level. For a level 2 NCEA task, it would need to match up to the level 7 achievement objectives from the teaching and learning guidelines. And that it's fair and consistent, that there's consistency between the task and the schedule, that the evidence statements, which I didn't write but you would have, are acceptable to show the difference between achieved merit and excellence, and that the judgment statements show sufficient detail about the step up between the levels of achievement. At this point, the critiquer will write some comments in here. If they think it's fit for purpose, the task is good to go. Whoever wrote the task, so if it's me, I would still need to go back and just double check, looking at any suggestions and making changes. So then I issue the task and it goes swimmingly, and I need to make sure that my work is moderated. Again, I can't be the only person to fill this in. It's really important that more than one person looks at samples of the student work. So I'm either going to find someone in my school who has appropriate subject expertise, or someone via an association like NZACT to help me moderate my work. It's really hard when you're sole charge, but a good way to do that is a bit of quid pro quo. So you only need to be looking here for samples of student work. You don't have to do the whole class. 8 samples is suggested, you may do more. And I think it's a good idea for this one to try and get samples of work that's at the boundaries, because they're usually the trickier ones anyway. So the marker puts their grade in, it's sent to a verifier. Verification doesn't have to be done individually, it sometimes can be a panel, or it can be that teachers, if there's more than one teacher in a school, they moderate and verify each other's. Whatever you use, you need to make sure that it's clearly stated here what the process is. Here at the bottom is information about where assessment materials have been reviewed. If something happens to you in the year, you leave, people change staff, something awful happens, the school needs to know where to find this information, and also your annotated exemplars that you've taken from these.